And we are back here with the World Championship Series, Austin, day number 2, as we get ready to kick off the round of 16 as our players begin to fight for their lives in the World Championship Series. There are only so many tournaments, only so many opportunities to become a champion. Who will come out on top this weekend? I'm Nathaniel, joined once again by Rotterdam and In Control. In Control, you're wowed by my intros the same way that one guy on Twitter was wowed by the wonderful way I did my tie. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, well, and there's so much to be wowed about. I'm excited because I'm going to be the realist guy. Yesterday was the trimming of the fat. It was some shocking results, but even the results were like, that was the exciting part. The games themselves weren't actually that good, which is kind of what happens in these tournaments. You get a lot of the guys that made it through the open bracket or are really tired from travel and they get destroyed. But today is the day we start to see some of those matchups really take shape and form. And I know we're starting off with a doozy, but just going down that bracket, there's some really, really cool ones. Despite all the jokes about there being 10 Zergs, there's still some really fun matchups.
I mean, I think yesterday, you always need a little bit of luck, right? As a tournament organizer, when there is 12 or 14 or 20 games being played at once, we can only pick one. And yesterday, we didn't get that fortunate with the games that we actually picked on the main stage. But, you know, in that player area, there were a couple of really shocking results. I think we all expected a lot of showtime after his great run in Leipzig. I had high hopes of the Dutchies. Call me biased, Jeff teased me, but there's no freaking way that I would have expected Optimus, Utomo, and Harsim to all go out.
They did all look pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love you, Kev.
I'm done.
Poor Kev. You just heard him right there.
That's right.
It's too deep.
We can talk a little bit more. The players all ready to be brought on stage. Didn't mean to cut you off too hard.
Unbelievable.
But we've got Smix on the stage ready to bring out the players in our first match. You pumped for day 2, Sue?
I am indeed. You guys are killing me, but I'm glad you mentioned this earlier, Nathanius, because for those of you who may have missed it, the Brazilian Terran yesterday mentioned that he considered the Finnish Zerg to be the best player at the event, but it just made him want to play him more. It looks like he got his wish. Please welcome on stage, it is Kelazhur and Serral.
Good old Terran versus Zerg to start things off.
Nate.
Kelazhur coming in from Brazil. A very strong player we've seen time and time again. Had a really good 2017. A lot of high-placing finishes in these circuit events, Roddy.
Made it to the global finals. I mean, that was one hell of an achievement. Not many people would have picked Kelazhur in the beginning of 2017 to actually go all the way towards the global finals. A lot of people did predict Serral to make it, and he did make it as well. So you're looking at two guys that made it to the global finals last year. What I'm mostly curious about in this series, Nate, is how is Kelazhur going to play? Because I think Serral, from time to time, has struggled a little bit with mech. Kelazhur has busted out mech as well against Serral in Nation Wars. Took a map of him. I know you're frowning, but maybe on a map like 16-bit, it's actually possible that he busts out a little bit of mech.
I like 16-bit for mech builds versus Zerg quite a bit. I think range is something that's going to be important versus Serral, but is it better for him to try those strategies, or should he just do what he's only done? I feel like precision with the whatever build you're best with might be strongest against him.
I mean, that is the eternal question of StarCraft. When it comes up when you face the other monster. So it's like, if he just does his generic stuff against this beast right here, then maybe you just die. You die 1,000 deaths. And I begged to be able to say this. Serral looks like the villain, and I'm loving it. They're putting red light on him. His jersey's got like the Darth Maul effect going on. The video, I don't think production's quite there yet, but if you can show the video of him shaking hands with Clem, it's Anakin Skywalker at the young Jedi temple, like just before he chops up like 30 children.
I don't think he shook any of their hands, but
dude, it looks so good.
Let's find out if he chops up Kelazhur as we have our match ready. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to kick off day 2 here at the World Championship Series.
Thank you so much, Nate. We are getting ready to hop into this first series for day 2. My name is Fear Dragon. I'm joined by Pig. Pig, are you excited for this?
My man, I am ready for some action-packed StarCraft games. What a way to kick it off. The Brazilian champ and, of course, the Finnish phenom. It's going to be an epic one, dude.
And remember that this is where the best of 5s begin. So you know what? There's no real luck factor that you just get to say, oh, I snuck 2 quick wins in on you. No. You got to really earn your victories here.
Oh, yeah. This one is going to be an epic match. And we're going to be starting off on Catalyst. Down here in the bottom right-hand side of the map, representing Root Gaming, it is Kelazhur.
And his opponent spawning up here in the top left-hand corner of the map. Still the favorite, the red Zerg player from SC Esports. It is Serral. Eyes of Killer.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad the Night King nickname never stuck with Serral. I think if we get some more more shots like that, it should stick around. You know, he's the ultimate bad guy, the ultimate boss at this point. It's awesome. I kind of want to talk about Kelazhur a little bit, though, because we were talking yesterday on the desk about, you know, how he kind of disappeared for a bit. I was saying, you know, I've been asking you because you're the big NA expert. You follow everyone from LATAM and North America. And a lot of us hadn't seen too much of Kelazhur's form, but I actually like seeing this from pro gamers. Really giving themselves an off-season. I feel like sometimes, you know, you've got a system like StarCraft where it's not as regimented as some other competitive, you know, sports and events. So sometimes players, they kind of just get stuck in this kind of over Christmas, over January, just kind of competing in all these online cups, and they don't really give themselves that break. But I really like it when a player takes a few weeks or a month or two off, really gives themselves that off season to reset. And maybe they're a little bit slower to kick off the season, but once they get back into it, you know, they're mentally refreshed. They've got that energy and that passion, and they're not burnt out at all.
I'm so glad you actually brought that up. Last year, he was talking about this in a wonderful interview done by Dank Toast, who was saying, you know, he talked to his grandpa because he was actually really struggling before last year, and his grandpa said, you know, I don't know anything about this StarCraft esports stuff, but maybe sometimes it's better to just not try quite as hard. You give yourself a little bit of breathing space. And Kelazhur took that advice, and he did really well last year, consistently getting those top 8 finishes. So I'm sure that he's also trying to take that to heart this year as well, especially after that Leipzig finish. And like you said, that kind of ramp up time, and it's starting to pay off now.
Starting to pay off indeed. You know, taking it from round of 32s to round of 8s, and
nice
that is
snipe.
so good. The first creep tumor. That's a good feeling. If there's one thing Kelazhur excels at, and I saw it yesterday in his games versus Scarlet, being so annoying with the Reaper and the Hellions. Of course, Serral did sneak the drone over to the third, so that third base wasn't denied. But if there's one guy who's going to like bring in SCV and micro it around, blocking the third base, the guy who's going to be like darting the Hellions and Reapers in, taking damage on them just to deny a hatchery by a few seconds, that's what Kelazhur's whole playstyle is about. He likes to get in the face of the Zerg player very early on. And I think we can see that with his build order here, Ravi. We've got 2 Cyclones already the way and an Armory. Is this like a super fast Cyclone Hellbat push?
It very well could be, and I love this kind of stuff. You know, this is the thing. Serral is the player that it gets really scary when you take him to the late game, and Kelazhur was not afraid to take these risks. The Overlord, I think, saw the Marine maybe moving across the map. He may saw just a little bit of a glimpse of it. We'll see how prepared Serral is.
And the creep tumor went down as well. That's so huge in this scenario, especially because if those queens go off creep, the Reaper can use its grenade to actually bounce them away from the creep into the Cyclones, and they cannot contest that. Yeah, he's immediately going to target the hatchery down. I wonder if this was a reaction to getting that creep tumor snipe. It feels like it was. And look, we've got Zerglings flooding out. Those Hellions, though, they are here. They're going to morph into Hellbats. And Zergling's not so good against Hellbat Cyclone.
Oh, man. And remember, the hatchery is so low on hit points as well, so Serral has to hold his ground here. Ling's trying to get in on top of the Hellbats. They do manage to get really close to the Cyclones, but the Cyclones are staying alive. The Hellbats take care of most of the Lings, and now it's Cyclones versus Queens. Kelazhur loses the majority of his force, but he's done a lot of damage just in forcing out these many units.
That counterattack was so nice by Serral. If another 2 Hellbats were here right now, this would be a dead hatchery, but Serral manages to hang on. The micro is good. That Cyclone does slip its way out of there and pull backwards. But nice defense by Serral. I mean, it was a good trade. I'm sure units lost is in the favor of Kelazhur, but the third stands strong. And now we've got 11 roaches in the production tab, Ravi.
Okay, well, that wall off is going to be so important for Kelazhur as the Lings start flooding across the map, but supply depot, supply depot, supply depot, supply... Oh, is he baiting it in? Okay, well, Serral's not going to fall for it anyways. There are a lot of Hellions behind that wall, so I guess it's okay. Third base going up. He has to be really careful about that. With the roaches moved across the map, that is going to be a big target for Serral.
Yeah, and these roaches are actually dodging the Hellions right now, moving straight across the map. He knows that he can just build more roaches, and he could even give up the third base if he has to. But if he hits with a counterattack, there is nothing at home for Kelazhur right now. He's going to try to do damage on the front. The Hellbats and the Cyclone going to be able to stop these Zerglings from collapsing on it, but what are you going to do against that? You've only got one little race car with a flamethrower, not the best unit to fight against those Roaches. Of course, the armored Roaches, amazing against Hellions.
I actually like this decision from Kelazhur. He just says, you know what, I'm going to give up my natural at this point. The Roaches are here. I just got to get out a Banshee to help try and defend against this. And he's going to start pulling back with the Hellbats and the Cyclones. It looks like a little bit of indecision here from Kelazhur.
Yeah, I mean, he just couldn't get more done there. He did roast a lot of the Zerglings. He's going to have to come home. So far, it has been amazing handling. I'm with you on that one, Ravi. 2 Cyclones come out, and actually he raises the depot to mess with the AI. Buys a bit more time. Focus fires down. About 4 of the Roaches. There's only a few Roaches left. Kelazhur here, making the best of a terrible scenario. Looks like he might barely be able to hang on, but I mean, the numbers, the reinforcements coming in. Serral has chosen his counter build perfectly, and it looks like Kelazhur, even with a Banshee popping out, he's going to be taking those worker losses. Suddenly, the SCVs are vulnerable.
Yeah, Kelazhur is down in falling in supply. The Banshee is out, and there's nothing to contest it, but there's nothing to contest the links. GG. Serral takes the first game in this best of 5.
That was so well played there. I mean, it looked scary from the start. The creep tumor goes down, that incredible little Cyclone held that push, but just 6 Zerglings slide into the natural of Kelazhur, force a little bit of APM, bit of micro, and most importantly, delay the Hellbat reinforce. If you're a Zerg player in that scenario, you always think, oh, I've almost overwhelmed it, the Hellbats are gone. If 2 more arrive, suddenly you go, oh, this is just not working out, and the 3rd base falls. You're such a bad position. But, hey, he's the Night King, man. He stays cool, calm, and collected no matter what goes on. I love that play from Serral. Looks like he's not phased at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also one of the best feeling ways to win, where your opponent goes for this hyper-aggressive play, and then you just throw some hyper-aggression back at them. It's like, no, I'm going to hold off this, and then I'm just going to counterattack with all these Roaches and Lings, and then I'm going to kill you. And, oh, look, you didn't actually hold off my aggression. I guess it kind of shows who's the better player here.
It's such a good way to see a player just jump on that decisive kind of counterplay. And always something which is tough to deal with, of course. Diego Kelazhur caught there going for the 3rd command center. Going kind of up the tech tree, he was adding on the vehicle upgrades. Did not spot those Roaches coming across the map at all. So good use of Serral, taking advantage of the fact that there are separate paths on that map, and instantly jumps on top of the counter aggression. It was a big commitment by Serral as well. You know, He was down quite a lot of workers. He was sitting on 33 drones throughout that. But this is something which you've got to do. A lot of players would kind of sit there and say, oh, maybe I drone up this hatchery that's got like 200 hit points on it. But Serral said, look, if I'm just attacking you, there's no way you can snipe this hatch. If I want a macro, it'll be off the back of this a bit later on when it's had time to regenerate, when I can transfuse. And I think that's a good way to kind of play the safe aggression.
Yeah, it's so decisive with Serral. He never really has to question himself or anything like that. But here we go. We're hopping into game number 2. Let's find out if Kelazhur can maybe put one on the board, or if Serral's going to continue his reign domination. We're going to be starting down here in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. Top of the blue Terran player, it is Root Gaming's Kelazhur.
Gonna be happy to be on his map pick here. But still a big obstacle in front of him. The favorite to win the entire thing. The champion from WCS Leipzig earlier this year. Representing ENC Esports, it is Serral.
Yeah, you were mentioning how this is going to be Kelazhur's map pick on 16-bit. And Roddy was talking at the desk a little bit about 16-bit and how having this kind of map where you have that tucked-in base, that easy natural expansion, it can maybe lead into something like the mech play that has been known to throughout.
Do you think Serral, what's interesting is with that back base, it can get sieged up by tanks across the gap quite well. I haven't really seen it too much in this matchup because Zerg, of course, is very flexible. They can kind of, expand elsewhere, and it's not as bad as, say, a Terran or a Protoss. But do you think Serral takes that as his 3rd base, or does he just expand flat along the south side of the map into kind of this straight line?
I usually tend to see, this is the sort of weird thing. I've seen a couple of players at the beginning of the ladder map while we're on their streams. They're like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to just try saving that base for later. And then that just becomes this weird place where Marines and everything, or drops, would just unload over there safely. And then they just run into your map. It's like, okay, this is just becoming this weird area where it's like, here, drop here safely because I'm not over there. So I actually still prefer it a little bit when players still take that base and just kind of make use of it.
Especially, like, I guess we've seen maps like this before, right? I mean, if we go way back, Nimbus was one of the first ones, I think, where you had like an in-base with a very exposed mineral line. More recently, Acolyte as well. And it's always like, well, yeah, you understand this is a very exposed drop point, but that's why you overcompensate for it. Often we'll see Spore Crawlers ringing that base, missile turrets in the other matchups and that sort of thing. So definitely something to kind of see how these players play it out. Is going to be a factory and a reactor on the way behind the Reaper. And both games so far, Kelazhur not really opting for the kind of safer Marine play or anything like that. And Kelazhur is going to be coming in with that Reaper harassment. The Zergling's out of position. They thought he was going to hop in the main.
All right, doesn't quite get that drone. The drone managed to survive by becoming a Spore Crawler for a little bit. Kelazhur, known for his Reaper control, by the way. He used to be one of the players, a lot of people think about the three racks.
He made a name for himself with that, didn't he?
Yeah, no kidding.
It was like the Kelazhur coming up era is like, oh yeah, that's like no one knew him at first, and I was like, no, he's the guy who kills everybody with 3 racks Reaper.
Oh yeah, everyone's eyes were on Thermal, and Kelazhur just kind of doing the same thing and showing some really, really solid play. Okay, we do still have that 1-1-1 setup with the Hellions. You were talking about this before. It's kind of funny. I was talking with a lot of like the foreign Terran players like Thermal, like Raze, or not Raze anymore, but Pasa and stuff, about how a lot of the Korean Terrans are going for that 2-1-1 opening, but it really seems like the foreign Terrans really don't like to go for that. They like to stick with this 1-1-1 stuff.
I mean, if there's one thing European Zergs are really good at, it's shutting down a 2-1-1 because they love to squeeze those drones out. You give them an excuse to stay low on the gas, build a lot of queens, spread creep, and just make a pack of Zerglings. I mean, they're going to be so on top of that. So I definitely see it does kind of spiral into the meta once in a while, but not as often. And looks like a very interesting meta play. A Widowmine drop on the way here for Kelazhur. Going to be quite good since there are exposed mineral lines. So that's one of the big features, I think, on this map pool we don't talk about as much. Is the fact these mineral lines are so exposed on the edges. And that's going to play into this as well. Range Liberators, right?
All right, and we're talking about that easy natural expansion, but this is one of the expansions that's also pretty vulnerable to drops, as well as things like
exposed.
Liberator harassment. That Fusion Core allows the Terran player to get up that range upgrade and really put the pressure on a player like Serral.
This is such a smart way to play. How do you play this map against Zerg? Zerg looks at this map, says you've got one tiny choke point into your 2 bases, a slightly larger choke point into 3 bases. The last thing on the Zerg's mind is aggression. All they're focusing on usually is just building up their economy. This is a nice way to start it out. The Queens are in position, though. Lots of Zerglings there as well. The drones immediately pulled. One Widowmine does get sniped, and only managing to damage a few Queens.
That could not have gone better for Serral, and just how well he handled that. Barely loses maybe a drone there as a sacrificial lamb, but the Queen's taking the majority of the damage. Doesn't even lose many links, and now we got the Nidus Worm coming out here from Serral saying, look, you invested in all those Widowmines?
Yeah.
You just aren't gonna have an army. Now you might even be able to get some of the Hellions and the Reaper.
Well, this is the reason we see Nidus is so much on these macro maps, right? Is so many players take this assumption that Zerg's gonna be defensive. They say, you know what? I don't need standard defense. No Banshees, no tanks, no Cyclones. It's all Widowmines, which have all gone down, by the way, and now Liberators with range. There's literally no defense for this. Serral's just gonna run his Lings up the ramp, throw the Nidus Worm down, and he's just gonna jump right in there, straight on top of the production. Bunker's trying to go down. Kelazhur realizing what he's up against, but he's just got no material. What can he possibly defend this with?
Oh, this is so difficult too, because the Nidus Worm's gonna be right next to the tech lab on the factory, so he's gonna have a hard time getting out tanks or anything else out of that factory. Nidus Worm is there, it unloads, and Kelazhur, his defenses are just not there at all. There's nothing really around. The Widowmines on the outside of the map do get picked up, but he just hasn't done enough damage with them.
Serral here just pushing in with this Nidus Worm. He's focusing down the factory. He knows the siege tank is the big threat here, but there is no chance for that to pop out. And even though this Liberator has sieged up, there we go, Advanced Ballistics is done. There's just so few units. With only one barracks producing Marines, one starport producing Liberators, Kelazhur's Lib already taking a ton of damage. And he's going to try and fall back to his natural expand, but it's a tough position. He just does not have the resources required. A few drones are falling on the other side of the map.
Oh, but he's going to lose the medevac with all of the Widowmines inside of it. That was his only form of counter damage. He's keeping his command centers alive for at least a little bit. And like you said, backing up to that in-base natural expansion, but he's losing a lot of his production in the process. He doesn't even have space for it.
Yeah, this is such an awkward position being forced down there. I think he did lose his Liberator that went across the map as well. I'm not 100% sure, but looks like there we go. Nice corrosive miles do take down the defensive Liberator. The Master Repair holding on for a moment, but there's just no damage output. None of the Zerg units are actually falling here. And that's it. Serral with a quick checkmate in game number 2 is shutting it down. He's pushing through. There's just not enough numbers. Kelazhur pulling out the clever meta play, but Serral, this is a changed Serral. He's pulling out more aggressive plays. He said he's worked on his build orders, and that will be a very quick 2-0 lead.
GG, well played. Serral looking so strong today. Start off day number 2, and it's just, who's gonna beat this guy? How do you stop him?
This is that point where you ascend as the favorite player in the tournament. We always have talked about this over the years of StarCraft 2. Go all the way back to MVP, one of the original guys who was the king of wings in 2012, winning so many championships, 2011. How did he do that? It was by mixing in these 2 barracks plays, these aggressive timing attacks, while also being the god of macro. And that's what we're seeing from Serral. He said yesterday, you know, I've worked on my build orders. I started to mix in the 6 Zergling pool first, and he just gets a free win versus the proxy barracks play against Clem. Today, we see him exploding into counter-aggression in game 1. Game 2, deflects the Widowmine drop, immediately drops the Nidus Worm, throws a bunch of Queens and Roaches in there. And this is that point where he's not even having to show his best macro builds. He's not having to give away any secrets. It's just pulling out one of the builds that is, you know, he's got a full deck of cards right now, a full deck of plays in his hand.
And a lot of them are almost even just taking advantage of the situation of, oh, Kelazhur is going for this kind of weird thing where he's going for these 4 Widowmines and going for the drop. Well, I can react to this because I know you just aren't going to have anything back at home, and Kelazhur also happens to have the Liberator. Or even in the first game where he goes for that kind of very aggressive Cyclone Hellbite push, he's like, actually, you're just not going to have anything to deal with the Roach counterattack. So exactly, he's more almost in some ways, it feels like reacting to Kelazhur, and that doesn't really reveal what your standard game plan is really going to be in that situation.
So decisive. He's just a master of finding the way to use those Zerg units at the correct times. A lot of players, they want to try and get ahead with the pressure against Zerg, be a little bit greedy off the back of that. Serral never seems to let them get away with it. He's finding his way through in these games. He is just 1 game away from sealing the deal.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. It is match point for this player down or up here in the top right-hand corner of the map. We have our blue Terran from Rude Gaming. He needs your energy. It is Kelazhur.
And his opponent down here in the bottom left-hand side of Lost and Found. The hero from Finland, the guy who is playing the game at a level we haven't seen in a long time. The red Zerg player. Give it up for Serral. You know, I think about that build in the last game, and game number 1 as well to a certain extent, and I think, you know, I've been on the receiving end of plays like that as the Zerg player, and if you don't hit that Nidus counterattack, and you've got Widowmines getting some kills and then Liberators sieging up, and you've just got no counterplay to it, it can feel broken. You know, it can look amazing if that works out for Kelazhur. It's just, it's so funny when you get to this level of StarCraft, because a strategy which can look brilliant can also just get squashed like that, right? There's this small window in the build where Kelazhur is basically skipping your generic defense units. There's one thing which punishes it really hard, and you know what? Serral's just that good. He knew to pull that one thing out. And I like what you said as well. It might have even just been a reaction to seeing the Widowmine drop, saying this is an odd opening. I think maybe you're just kind of cutting a corner. Maybe you're skipping some of that defense.
And this is where it gets really tough for Kelazhur. He is known for his comebacks, so I'm not going to completely count him out just yet, but Kelazhur's also known for having risky play. When you're down 2-0 in a best of 5, you're 1 game away from being eliminated from the tournament. That doesn't leave a lot of room for those gambits to pay off, because if one of them in the next 3 games goes wrong, that's it. You lose the series.
Exactly. I mean, it's so much pressure now on Kelazhur's shoulders, but at the same time, I think if it was someone else, I might say they're going to get a bit stiff in their play when they're this far down. I think Kelazhur, you know, he went into this saying, look, I know Serral's the best player, but I want to face off against him. I know if I want to be the best, I've got to beat the best. And that's why he's, I think, going into this with a very balanced attitude, saying, you know what, I got nothing to lose. Everybody from this point, me being down 0-2, expects me to lose, but I'm just going to go in there and play my game. And I think he's going to come out with some very strong play And I don't think he's going to do anything crazy. You know, Kelazhur of old would have tried to proxy some barracks, would have tried to pull out something weird. Maybe a medevac boost upgrade play like he did. He actually won a lot of games with that at BlizzCon, which was really cool. But I think he's just going to stick to some of the solid openings that have worked out for him so far.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Kelazhur, he has been going for these really aggressive openings, but he does have a pretty solid late game play. So maybe that is kind of the path he can go down, where he doesn't get super hyper aggressive with these weird forms of aggression. He just does kind of the standard Terran pressure, move out with a couple of Hellions, get some map control, start taking a third, trying to make sure that you don't die into anything super crazy as well.
Yeah, I mean, knowing his skill set as well, there's always going to be a few multi-prong pokes here or there. Nice catch on these Zerglings. Of course, he did lose his Reaper early, which is why these Zerglings tried to sneak across the map. Serral thought he could get in there kind of as the Hellions were halfway across the map, maybe pick off an SCV or a Mule, Zergling speed would finish, and then he gets out of there before the next Hellions pop out. But Kelazhur, adjusting to the fact that he lost his Reaper, leaves them at home a bit longer, catches those Zerglings, and I love that pickup. It's going to be a Viking first for Kelazhur, of course, going to deny the Overlords, guaranteed damage, and putting the Zerg player in the dark. Always a good way to start it out for the Terran.
Oh, Kelazhur running in with some of these Hellions, past the Queens, takes a lot of damage there, but opts not to go too much further. Of course, that Viking getting those free kills, like you said, just any form of damage is going to be nice, and I like this. He's going to have a very typical follow-up here. It's going to just be Cloak Banshee following up with these Hellions.
Yeah, not too many exposed mineral lines or edges on this map for the Banshees. The top of the third base is usually where they're going to come in from. The main base is always a little bit tough because there's so much ground you have to walk across. Once an Overseer's out, the Queens can really hunt down your Banshees in this big kind of open area of ground. So it's not like a crazy good Banshee map. It's not bad either, though. Banshee is one of the safest units in the game and always going to find a little bit of utility.
Yeah, already got the Spore Crawler coming down for Serral. He's got his Lair Tech on the way, which should be finishing pretty close to around the time the Banshee gets Cloak, if not just a little bit after. So he can make Overseer if he really needs to. But we got an Armory coming out once again. And ooh, double. Wait, okay. For a moment I was like, double Starport. No. It was just the Starport picking up.
That's like the worst when you do that in a ladder game.
Can you imagine if Serral looks back, he double takes, he's like, you have 2 Starports.
It's like he's doing the Banshee speed build.
Oh, man.
It does look like it might be mech, though, with that Armory going down and no Cyclones yet. Okay, 2 Cyclones starting up just now. So, yeah, Kelazhur are going to be looking to really keep the creep spread back. Might even commit to like a 3 Banshee, 2 Cyclone Hellbat timing. This Banshee going to come in the main, is going to get a couple of workers and deny a little bit of mining time.
Yep, trying to poke it at the front, but Serral has his Queens in position. This Banshee getting little bits of damage. I mean, even just denying a bit of gas income messes with Serral's economy a little bit and kind of how he wants to spend that. Third command center's finished up, and he can morph that into an orbital command now, but should have no danger there.
Those Zerglings not being paid attention to by Serral. Going to lose quite a few of those. I love the move to kind of get them over there in position, but not really finding an angle just yet. And second and third factory are on the way, as well as +1 vehicle weapons here for Kelazhur. Is going for, kind of continuing that tech. I think what we often see against Serral, these mech players, we've seen Hero Marine do it a few times, where the moment where you can break Serral is often off like just non-stop tank production off these 2 factories, and it's about 8 tanks onwards, you start to get your push going. And if you can hit him before Vipers are out, before Broodlords are out, or, you know, sometimes he goes Swarm Hosts, if you can kind of get in there on his 4th base, that's sometimes where you can find a weak spot in Serral's armor.
One of the Banshees getting awfully low. The creep spread just not quite far enough, so Banshee will make its way out of there alive. And, you know, it is pretty interesting because a lot of Terran players, since the Marauder buff, have been going for Bio, so maybe this is going to be something Serral plays a little bit less against these days, although he's got plenty of experience in the past against it.
Yeah, definitely could be. And, I mean, mech is something which is always a strong sort of composition.
That's a pretty bad supply block. He doesn't have a...
He hit one on 93 as well, but this one, he did use a supply drop to get out of that one, so it's not as catastrophic. Definitely something which does slow him down there. And interestingly, he's going for double Thor, but those Thors have been massively, massively delayed. So I feel like with those siege tanks in there, it is a little bit nasty. You know, you've got the core of roaches out for Serral. You really want to have at least 4 or 5 siege tanks to blast those down.
A little awkward. The supply depots are down. Some roaches walk straight into the natural, and it's mostly just Hellions and 1 Banshee to help deal with this, but he's doing some counter damage on the other side of the map. The Queen trying to deal with that, but more roaches and Ravagers moving into that third base at the same time, and Serral seems to be everywhere with just a handful of these units, killing off 15 workers. This is some really value trade for Serral.
Yeah, that slows Kelazhur's build up down a lot. And these roaches do have roach speed. They are going to try to do a bit of stutter step to get out of there. The Hellions and Cyclones do back off. It's mass roach Hydra. What I really like from Serral here is he's not rushing to hive. He's not rushing to kind of swarm hosts. This is almost a Sue style of burst mech where you just kind of mass roach Hydra. And a lot of the time the Terran just assumes there's a next step coming out. He's got the urgency on him. Kelazhur is no doubt thinking there's going to be Vipers, there's going to be swarm hosts or some next step. I've got to push you. But if he moves out on the map, he's just going to get swamped by this huge Zerg force.
And that Zerg force is making its way over to the third base right now as he moves out with some of those Thors.
There's only 1 tank.
Tank is in a
2
nice
siege
spot,
tanks.
and the Hellbats are going to be able to buffer quite a bit. He's moving forward some of the other tanks to try and fully cover that third base, just losing out a little bit of mining. We'll see how effective this drop is going to be, though, with the Thor.
No damage whatsoever. I mean, a single Thor is such a light pressure in the first place, and the 5th base is now on the way for Serral. Serral making Dropper Lords. Oh, I love it. This is something we haven't seen in a while. This used to be so big against mech in like 2013, 2014. Players would doom drop Roach Hydra. They'd start dropping Hydras all over, use that mobility, use the swarm to overwhelm. People haven't been doing it very much. It's very rarely popped its head up in recent times, but I love Serral just showing this depth in his play, and you can see he's got the army on the south moving across. That's going to hit the natural, and at the same time, he's going to drop in the main while continuing to siege the north side of that third base. 3 prongs of aggression. This is Serral in his element.
Oh, this is going to be brutal. Kelazhur just has no anti-air to help deal with this or kind of take in any of these overlords outside of just the Thors. The attack comes in on that south side, like you said, and the drop is actually going to go into the main base while the rest of the army can charge into the third.
There's nothing there. There is nothing in the main base right now. The Banshee comes back, but there's an Overseer and Hydras. They don't care. The factory production going down. The third base getting sieged at the same time. 1 tank goes down at the front. Another siege tank falls, and this Roach Hydra doing so much damage. Kelazhur is actually handling this better than I thought he'd be able to. Dropping Hellbats in the main base at the same time. The natural being broken in, though. It's chaos on all fronts, but the Hellbat drop in the main does clean up that prong of the aggression.
This is really rough, and Kelazhur does an amazing job of holding off the attack of the main base, but he loses 19 workers. He loses a lot of his siege tanks, a lot of that mech army that's hard to replace, and guess what? Pig, Roaches and Hydras are not a big deal to lose.
Not at all. I mean, yeah, he delayed his tech, but when you do that much damage, you are more than happy. Roach Hydra is all about trading out before your opponent gets to max, and guess what? Kelazhur is nowhere near maxed out now. 138 supply. There's going to be another Roach Hydra drop, and at the same time, Serral is going into Vipers and Broodlords. He's got the next step. Kelazhur, I don't know how he is still so high on workers, how he is hanging on. He's up at 63 workers. He's on 145 supply. He needs to crush this attack to be ready for those Broodlords.
Oh, Serral's pulling a bunch of the army up into the main base once again with those drop overlords, but at the same time he moves in from the south side. Siege tanks are still set up there, and the Hellbat's doing a decent job taking out a lot of that army that's moving in forward, but there's just not enough here for Kelazhur. He's gonna lose his siege tanks, he's gonna lose a bunch of SCVs at the third, and Serral's still winning the engagement in the main base. This has just been completely Serral outplaying Kelazhur.
Not enough butter on the toast here for Kelazhur. His units just are spread too thin right now. The tanks coming back, the Hellbat drop, a good way to deal with this, but I think it all comes back to that first Roach Hydra kind of running on the natural in the third, got some damage done. Serral here is just been all over this game. He's been so decisive. This is not the old Serral we used to see where he would sit back and always play to the late game. He has really expanded his depths of strategies and plays, and this is making him so dangerous. You cannot sit back and assume you're safe against this Zerg player. Serral is going to rotate to the south side, and I think he's got Vipers over here now as well.
Yeah, and not only does he have Vipers, he also has a finished up Greater Spire. So he can go into those Broodlords pretty much whenever he wants at this point. Viper pulls a Siege Tank, knocks that out. The Planetary Fortress getting low. Repair's going to salvage the situation for a little bit, but for how long, Egg?
Yeah, this is great damage so far. A nice parasitic bomb. I love that. But good reaction from Kelazhur as well. He's hanging on like a champ here, but against an 82 drone Zerg with 3-3 on the way.
Oh.
Another few Vipers being added in as well. It is definitely not an ideal situation. You know, Serral, he definitely had some urgency in his play earlier, saying, I've got to trade this out while the Roach Hydra is still good. But you add Vipers to this, Roach Hydra is suddenly a very, very long-term composition when it has those spellcasters backing it up.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty difficult game for Kelazhur to try and make a comeback into. And I can only imagine right now, he's just sitting there thinking, God, I asked for this. I wish this upon myself. What was I thinking? Man, it's really hard when you kind of have that confidence and you want to make that sort of upset happen, and then something like this happens where you don't even really feel like you're getting any real little victories either.
You know, it's crazy because I do feel like Kelazhur is playing very, very well here, but it's almost like Serral's catching him off guard strategically. It feels like Kelazhur was not ready for these plays out of Serral, and definitely he's got those Vikings which kind of need to stop the Vipers getting their spells off when this fight comes. That's why you can see him so actively scouting with the Vikings. He wants to figure out where's the army, are there more drops coming, where are those Vipers, and if he can take out 2 of the Vipers, if he can maintain a siege tank spread, he may be able to defend the Roach Hydra, but I mean, the Flying Moustache is going to throw their babies into this Siege Tank army. If there's one thing Siege Tanks really are terrible against, it's Broodlords.
Yeah, I mean, just to put this in raw numbers right now, Pig, there is a Viking out, there are 0 Thors, and there's a second Viking being made. So these 2 Vikings have to kill off all of the Broodlords before Kelazhur loses his entire army.
That's just so smart from Serral as well, so patient with this, and you could see the Vikings was so panicked, and he's like, yeah, I'll just abduct 4 of those, you're reset, you don't have any anti-air, now the Broodlords come in. Serral here, clinical, clean play. He's taking a 7th base behind this. His gigantic economy, a huge army, and as the Broodlords press forward, we are going to see Kelazhur here, realizing this is such a desperate scenario. He's getting ready to try to jump on this army, but with only a couple of Vikings in the sky, it's all about somehow trying to eliminate the Roach Hydra. It's such a hard ask.
And this is the desperation final attempt. He's going to at least go for a bit of a moral victory, trying to take out that ground force, and maybe if he does that, he can go after those Broodlords. A lot of the Broodlords are dying, and I'm going to say Kelazhur's doing better in this fight than I thought he would, but Serral still cleans house. 3-0 Serral.
Not a single fragment of weakness there from the Finnish player. Looking very confident. A lot of us experts have been saying going into this tournament, you know what? Zerg vs. Terran might be his weak matchup. Looks like we were wrong, guys. He is looking so solid and so on point. The variety of plays and the decisiveness with those counterattacks off the back of those defenses, just such good Zerg vs. Terran.
All right, we're hopping on to the main stage with Serral and Smix. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Fear Dragon. Congratulations, Serral. You're moving on to the round of 8 with such a clean and strong 3-0 here. I know that Kelazhur is a player you recently played in the Nation Wars, so did this series just play out as you expected it to?
I think Scarlet and Nerchi are probably the most standing up players there, but I think DNS has improved a lot, and I think he might take Hero Marine down, and he might be a super powerful player as well. So I think there's a lot of good players, but I think I can handle all of them.
Sounds good. Congratulations again, sir. We'll see which player you face, DNS or Hero Marine. That is the next match coming up. Nathanias, back to you.
What is thy bidding, my lord?
Talk about handling players. Serral with a def 3-0 victory. I mean, this was rough for Kelazhur. This was painful. He tried some funny, cheeky stuff, and it did not work.
And it was put down in the most glorious way too. Like each time it was, this is what you do to that, executed to the highest level, and it got shut down. It's not even like we look at this and go, what happened, Kelazhur? What were you thinking? Like, all of Kelazhur's ideas, pretty darn good. He executed them fairly well. StarCraft's that brutal game where sometimes you just face a guy that's playing on a different level, and it's a weird concept because I think a lot of people, they're like, well, what could he have done? What could he have done differently? And sometimes the answer is that guy's better than you, and people aren't comfortable with that. But that is something that StarCraft sometimes shoves in your face. In fact, my entire StarCraft 2 professional career was basically a very long speech to Jeff about how sometimes a lot of people are better than you, and message was received.
Just a rough series for Kelazhur. It really felt that in none of the games he had any momentum going for himself. I think Catalyst, the very first, we look at that little Cyclone Hellbat push, and you're like, that looks kind of nice, but Serral is so good to just be annoying with 6-7 links on the other side of the map. At that moment, as a Terran player, obviously you have to pay attention to that, and then the Queens, they get a couple extra shots off, and suddenly that push is not all that scary anymore. Then Serral counters, it's game over, and it really felt like that set the tone for the entire best of 5.
And he just always, not to, I mean, I know we don't have all the time in the world for this, but like there'll be moments where he has slow lings caught in a situation like that, and a lot of times people will just kind of shift their attention away because they're just dead, but he will actually right-click through 3 SCVs, he'll get 2.5 of them, but that's something where he gets that, whereas everybody else gets nothing, and it's all that stuff accumulating that he just constantly does a really good job of.
Yeah, I mean, he played really well. To that first game, as a Terran player, you think about that attack, and you're like, I'm looking at it like, oh, the third base was so close to dying, and Kelazhur might be thinking to himself, I didn't get it, so I need to get moving with the rest of everything, and, you know, Serral's just thinking, I'm going to kill you right now, and that was, that thought process is so hard to follow. He was really inside of his head the whole series.
And I almost feel like we got robbed of a potentially very good game on 16-bit, because I do feel that if Kelazhur can get away with his opening of advanced ballistics, like that's one hell of an annoying opening to deal with. So if Serral would have just played a very passive game there, but obviously Serral was like, nah, I've played on this map before, and there is a chance he might do that. I wonder what would have happened after Kelazhur, that first mine drop. I know it didn't do that much, but then he sent out 4 more mines. I wonder if he would have kept those at home, fire up the Cyclones immediately. You put 4 mines next to Nidus. I'm not saying that he holds, but obviously that matter of fact should have stayed at home.
To stop the chain fuses, you need to have 4 Cyclones there when they pop with your SCVs. So you have to see it before it happens. But unfortunately, he didn't. And Serral advances on. I do believe we have an updated bracket to look at as we see our first place player advancing forward into the round of 8. He'll be facing off against the winner of DNS and Hero Marine, a Terran versus Protoss match that'll be coming up shortly. But I can't say, no, we're not surprised, right? Serral he comes in, he's been touted as this top player, and we do expect to see him continue to move forward.
We're just really lucky. The way these players are doing it is very different from where StarCraft came for us, where a lot of times foreigners were like, they'd be better than the other foreigners, but Serral is legitimately one of the best players in the world right now. And with the WCS system we've had that the last couple of years, Neeb last year was in a form where he was one of the best players in the world. And it's just such a treat to watch him play at this level.
And isn't it amazing how Serral even said in the interview as well, where he still feels he's not necessarily the best player against Mech, that he just played a best of 5 against a very good Terran, where he not once truly faced a powerful Mech army, because he just avoided it. Like he did.
To be fair, Kevin, what I like is he said he's maybe not the best. And I was like,
it's not a statement.
It's a soft maybe. We're gonna take a look at the schedule to keep y'all up to date on where we are headed with today's show. As you can see, we're just moving down the bracket. We've got DNS versus Hero Marine, Lambone True, Scarlet Inertio, and of course Neeb versus Mana. We're just going all the way through the round of 16 today. We've got a lot of games coming up. DNS versus Hero Marine, TVP should be good.
Yeah, that's going to be a really good one. I'm very excited for it. But can we also just give a shout out to Mana for suddenly being here again in the round of 16? Like that's really good. He's been around for all these years. Last year really wasn't his year, but suddenly he's here. He went through a couple of very tough groups. He was also tired from a long journey. Round of 16, Jeff, not bad. What? What is so funny?
I know, I like it. I don't know that we're at that level where we talk about Mana that way yet. We're like, can we look who appeared here?
Wait a minute, he was encased in amber and we brought him back to life.
Wow. He's a good player.
He is,
Look,
but-
just because you beat him on your stream, Kevin, and that's what this whole segment's about, doesn't, you know?
Honestly, I thought he was going to retire after Rotterdam beat him on ladder.
I would've.
Personally, just
Very
throwing it out
few
there.
people who haven't fallen yet.
Okay. Well, that's all we have for this segment, ladies and gentlemen. We got that Terran versus Protoss coming up next. You're watching the World Championship Series here in Austin. We'll be right back.
Dad, the other kids on chat say my voice